Hey everybody, I'm going to do a quick recap on our NW2 class. So I'm going to share my screen. Remember, NW2 means network equals net worth. And this particular class on self-sabotage was fantastic because it has a lot of different parts to it. So one of the reasons that we want to look at self-sabotage is because there's a way for us to build wealth differently, that I am the prosperity mindset instructor, that this is what we've been doing for a long time, is building new ways to think about being kinder, gentler, thoughtful, more loving in the world. And just so happens, you'll make more money at it. So self-sabotage is often about something that is unresolved, two things that are kind of fighting next to each other, but it's also about the anxiety of not being able to control uncertainty. And that's why I bring it up, and I bring it up about every few years because it's a trickster, and it can look like a lot of things because, again, we've gone over trauma, we've gone over business trauma, we've gone over other topics that are very similar. So I want to just go into self-sabotage so that you can kind of decide, is this you just resisting change? Is this perfectionism? We have another class coming up on perfectionism that I think is a real eye-opener. So when you start to look at it, it can be that you maybe are just feeling intolerant, you can't do anything, or maybe you're just avoiding stuff. Maybe you're self-medicating, maybe you're doing poor eating. There's a million ways. And I have a new tool that's an old tool. We've talked about the Pebble method before. I love the Pebble method. So I'm going to give you a new use on that today as well. When we look at internal contradictions, the reason I came to do this as a video and not just an audio was because of this red sign right here, right? When we're getting these contradictions, right? Stop. Oh, but come near me, right? We get these internal contradictions and we don't always know what they do. We don't always recognize them. We just know that there might be a hesitation or something else. So when you're looking up at sabotage, the first thing I do is go, well, what's conflicted about this within you? So if you know that you're sabotaging something, the easiest thing to do is to take a breath and just go, okay, what do I think the two things are within me, the red and the green? What are those two things that are conflicting? And when I look at that, then I go, okay, let's put in a solution. And the solution is these two items that we add in mindful isolation. And remember, mindful isolation came from all of our trauma classes. But the mindful isolation is really there to go, let me contrast that with values. For those of you who have done your values work, this will go right to the moon, fast, 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 fast. Because if you can kind of get into your values and understand what two things or three things or five things, some of you are really complex, but the things that are bumping up against each other, if you can figure out how they're bumping up against each other and it's attached to your values, this will go really quickly. This is a place where you can screenshot this slide. Mindful isolation is, again, this is from our trauma journaling class. So you can always go back in and look at that. But again, it is this mindful seclusion of time so that you can get in. And the key item is understanding your fundamental truth. What is the fundamental truth that you have on your values and how maybe they're not connecting? So the Pebble method that we've used before is we've used it as a reward system. This new option is really, for those of you who are going to be working on your self-sabotage, is that we just take a plate of these tiny pebbles and we just put that plate on our workspace. And then every time that we notice that we're having that hesitation or that we're noticing the contradiction within ourselves, we're noticing the self-sabotage, then we just put the pebble in our hand or in our pocket. You don't have to do anything right there. But at the end of the day, you want to start to review them. Most people that do the Pebble method are shocked to find that they have 8 to 12 pebbles in a day, that this is how many times we are actually feeling incongruent. And you'll be surprised at how many things you actually avoid. So when we look at that in business, we're really looking at the sabotage and the types of sabotage, but we are going to be talking about beliefs and behaviors, actions that interfere. Is it sabotage or is it not? Well, sabotage is always around beliefs and behaviors. And in business, we really see this as people who are walking out of situations that they're not even going in, they're hiding, or they're feeling really taken advantage of, or they may be using anger to punish other people. We see this a lot in business owners who are angry with their staff, they're angry with how things are going, and then they kind of try to punish the people around them. So some of it might be trauma, and some of it is sabotage. So that's why we're kind of going to walk through it and stay open in our review. When I look at sabotage, it really is actions that interfere with long-standing goals, stuff you know. And sabotage is also another way to look at it, is that that internal system gets clogged, it gets bogged, it gets kind of jacked up because it's in dysregulation. It can't figure out how to manage these opposing values. And for some of you, it's just bad habits. I mean, that quite honestly, some of you just got into some bad habits, and those bad habits are really solvable when we look at your values, when we look at things like trauma, when we look at drama, but we really look at what is it. So when you are thinking about what you are doing or what isn't it, I'll tell you what sabotage doesn't look like. What sabotage doesn't look like is you walking positively into situations with resources and valuing the ability to create with other people equally, right? That you're willing to bring all of you in. It's fun. It's not internally distressing. You don't have to fight the desire to be there, but you can move forward in everyday business tasks, and you don't have to be at odds with it. It's effortless. I'm glad I'm here. And the types of things that we're doing are building equality, that this is a good place for everyone. So think about, right, investing in your values is the fastest way to counteract your self-sabotage. As soon as you can do those two things and look at what is it that you value, this will go a lot faster. So this is another place where you can take a screenshot, identify the behavior. You have to write it out and define it. To just say, I'm playing video games, that's my sabotage. You have to really identify the behavior. I play video games, and then you have to write it out and define. And I play video games because I'm overwhelmed, or whatever that is. So you want to write out all of the things that are around that. Sometimes you are looking for a reward during the day. Sometimes you're just feeling like you want to do something different. You have to create a plan and act on it. That's why I like that pebble technique, is it will not slow you down in the day, but you can just pick up a pebble, set it to the side, and at the end of the day, review the pebbles to go, oh yeah, when did I realize that? Some of you might just write it down, but you don't have to review it until there's a time where you can kind of exhale and just be with the actions and the values and the complexity of the questions that you're acting. So you're going to write out and define, right, what is the behavior, why is it, what is it about? Then you're going to create a plan and you're going to act on it. And the practicing mindful change, this is where your values work is here. And then number 5, do not forget the 5th step, because it is about communicating those changes. I did this because this is where a buddy call is really helpful. This is where talking to other people are about, having other people that you are talking about how you're growing personally. I love a buddy system on this. I love a buddy system on that. And this is the one that comes up, right? Well, what if I have a lot of things I'm avoiding? Well, that's great. We're just going to make a list. And most of you, because you are complex, you do have many things that you're avoiding. And you're avoiding them for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're just super time consuming and they're complex. And this is, this is your life, right? This is the melody of your life. This is a beautiful and complex cake to make. So be generous. It's layer after layer after layer after layer. This was my beautiful niece's wedding cake, and it was just layer after layer. It was like 5 feet tall. It was just unbelievable. But it is a beautiful and complex cake to make. You are. And the problem with sabotage is that they stack up really quick. People have a lot of them. And they have a lot of things that they're sabotaging. They have a lot of ways that they're sabotaging. And they often really just identify the symptom. I play too many video games, but they don't actually go to the actual problem. So when I see it the most, I see it as people who are really talking about, I can't do math, right? Because I'm a math geek. I'm a business strategist. That's what I'm doing all the time. So when we're doing business strategy, I hear people tell me all the time, my gosh, I can't do it. But the reality is that somewhere back there, all of the little things that they're doing to avoid doing the bookkeeping or avoid doing the work that they need to do in their accounting department or sending out billing is really a much more complex problem. And the complexity is that they may have some sort of insecurity from childhood. They may have had an over-controlling or dominant parent, that they may just be uncomfortable with making a wrong turn. And that's different than perfectionism, but they just may be uncomfortable. And math feels like one of those things. So we're not just looking to identify the symptom, we're really looking for the internal problem. So, right, identify the behavior and then write it down to define it. That I avoid doing accounting, and then write out why it is, right? What is it? I don't get my monthly done. It's not on my schedule, right? Define what it is. So that's your step 1 and 2. The other thing I remind people about is when you look at this picture, it is a bunch of circles and they're all different colors. And the fact is that we all make lots of little choices every day, and some of them add up to success and some of them add up to failure. And what ends up happening is because they're all spread out and all over, you actually don't have any idea how much of this page is red, how much of this page is gray, how much of this page has red in it, but it's not filled in, right? There's some complexity here. The reason that sabotage is such a big deal, and why I bring this forward to kind of laugh about it a little bit, to be a little easier on ourselves, a little kinder, a little thoughtful, a little gentle, is that it's a process. This is a process, but it's complex. And, you have the good fortune of having good intention. We all have good intention, but this is about really paying attention to how many teeny tiny decisions we make that lead us towards success or failure. And many of you have successes that you want. So when do we see, so one of the questions you can start to ask yourself about sabotage is, when did this habit start? So this picture right here is from Utah, by the way. So I was, for those of you who follow my Workaway projects, this is from Workaway. But anyway, so when did this habit start? When I was in Utah, one of the things that I had to kind of ask myself about my own self-sabotage is, wow, what's the earliest time that I remember starting to sabotage myself? And most people start sabotaging themselves much earlier in education. So when we look at one of the questions I asked people is that, did you see yourself sabotaging yourself in your education? Did you have did you start using avoidance as a soothing technique? Was procrastination a tool for you? Did you start unhealthy comparison? Because self-sabotage in one area of your life will often creep deliciously and melodically and trickstery into another place. So I'd like to keep tabs on, when did sabotage start? what can you put in as things that you remember about it, right? How can you kind of do that? Unhealthy comparison is one I see a lot. This is a picture that I did of myself, but this is really to remind people that grew up in chaotic situations that when you look at your own sabotage, if you have grown up in a chaotic environment and that's where your home base was, chaos may be comfortable for you. And so if chaos is comfortable to you because that's how you learn to survive, or that you were in really emotionally challenged situations, part of self-sabotage for you may be that you're drifting towards comfortable chaos. And that is really why therapy is invented, right? That's is one of the things. If this is you, mark it down to go, wow, I'm really comfortable in chaos. It doesn't mean that chaos is good for you. Just because you're comfortable in it doesn't mean that it's good for you. My husband and I grew up in very different home environments. That I grew up with lots of people around. It was crazy all the time that, you know, like find your boots, stuff like that. He grew up in a really quiet suburb that didn't have a lot going on. So he has a really quiet life. So when I'm in a situation where it's noisy and racket is happening and kids are running around, I'm quite at home. That doesn't bother me a bit. For him, he finds it distressing because he wasn't brought up in chaos or being emotionally traumatized every day from your cousins or something. So, who I still love, by the way. But one of the things about self-sabotage is looking at how it's showcasing. We see a lot of times that people are avoiding people in places because that's their learned safety pattern. So you can't kind of yell at yourself about self-sabotage and just go, I'm doing it and I have to stop that. It's really looking at it in a generous heart. And remember that these are improvements. Sometimes it's just recognition that you're eligible to do, but we want to kind of start refining how we look at sabotage and being a little more respectful of what it is that you're doing. And sometimes giving it a little bit of applause. One of the things about a safety pattern is that you learned that from whatever environment you grew up in or whatever you were going through. So if it's a learned safety pattern, sometimes it's just saying, look, how am I going to manage this? Is I'm going to ask myself, do I feel safe going to this? Right? Do I feel safe? That might be your action plan. So sometimes when someone is sabotaging, you can't just yell at them and just go, you're sabotaging. Or if you're doing it for yourself, you can't just U-turn to yourself and go, you're doing it wrong. It is to say, let's ask another question. Let's be a little more graceful with how you're asking yourself about your sabotage. Am I doing this because it was a learned safety pattern? Different than perfectionism. We have a whole other thing on perfectionism. So I'm going to say, yes, sometimes self-sabotage is perfectionism, but I'm going to just let you know, this is where it's at, but I'm going to skip past it because we've got a whole nother class on it. Career sabotage. Oh, yes. But for those of you who make top dollar, the sabotage that you end up having is that you are sometimes trapped in comfort, that we are trapped in, I know how to do it. This is easy. I don't have to grow necessarily, but feeling uncertain about, having anxiety about uncertainty is pretty normal. And sometimes it can look like a lot of things. This is where I really encourage you to just take a snapshot about, you know, are you suddenly having impossible standards? Like, I'm not going to move unless it's all of this. I'm not going to do this unless it's all of this. Sometimes it is also leaving jobs because you've left this emotional mess of people and you're like, I'm out, and not actually cleaning it up and carrying it with you. And then when you see it again, you're like, oh my gosh, and this happened at the last place. So it is also sometimes the sabotage or the anxiety about uncertainty is you haven't cleaned up your old messes. And fear of failure is absolutely the biggest call out that people have on career sabotage. But I'm just going to push back, and I'm going to push back kind of double time push, 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 that it is often that anxiety is the driver, that there's uncertainty here. And when we look at uncertainty and we parallel it with your values, and we really look at those values and how those inner values might be bumping up against each other, this can clear out really quick. So that's why I keep putting these things in multiple layers. If you start adding the combinations together more effectively, you'll be able to move more efficiently. So remember, smooth is slow and slow is fast. Smooth is slow, slow is fast. So one of the things that I see the most in people who are stuck is that they just start to lower the bar of expectation. I'm not even going to do that. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try. And that might be because they are tired, or they've had a circle of failure after failure after failure after failure, and they haven't processed it. For those of you who know those romantic relationship saboteurs, make no mistake, you're sabotaging in one area. If you're sabotaging in your education, you're sabotaging in your career, or in your romantic relationships, they're going to drive right on into other areas. So romantic sabotage, I see probably romantic sabotage really come through in partnership in business propositions, which is not willing to commit. That you suddenly see people who have kind of these underlying fears of loss or abandonment, and that they are unresolved topics. And we start seeing people start to pick, that start picking fights, they start controlling behaviors, that they can get in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it is that they'll leave before investing. Yeah, I'm not doing that, right? They just go, yeah, I'm out. I'm not willing to commit. And if those are the people that you have to kind of look at that and go, wow, is there a fear of loss or abandonment? Are you afraid that I'm not all in on this topic? Or calling someone else out on, I'm feeling as though you may abandon me in this project. Is that a possibility? And so calling someone else out on their form of sabotage in a gentle way, not seeking aggression, but to just generously kind of push it across the table to go, hey, would you allow me to speak freely on how this project is going for me? And it isn't to say, wow, I got to push this, that you have sabotage behaviors at your face. You can go, hey, I'm wondering if you are worried that I'm going to abandon you on this project. And that's about right, that I'm wondering if you are worried about something that I am doing, not you have issues and I think you're going to trip out, right? Push it, always reflect towards self. And sabotaging relationships with people, man, there's a whole piece around that about the way we sabotage. And relational sabotage, we see so much. We see it in sibling rivalry. We see it in family places where somebody wants to be superior, that they are trying to compete, and then they need to prove their worth. Boy, do we see relational sabotage in business. And when you start to identify that, different than loss and abandonment, right? Now we come into, right, this is someone who has to feel that they need to compete or prove their worth. I can't think of another form of sabotage that I see more in corporate America than relational sabotage. That we see people who are boasting, we see someone who is always trying to prove that they're superior, that they're going to control others, that they're downplaying, they're always working to win approval. And that relational sabotage is really a false narrative. So when you look at the esteem of the self, this is where that work fixes it. So when you're looking at your values and you go, oh, I see this is happening in these other people around me, or I'm seeing this, right? The U-turn, Y-O-U, right? Turn it around. If you're seeing it in someone else, do a U-turn, look right in the mirror and go, oh, am I seeing their relational sabotage because I actually have relational sabotage? Am I trying to compete, or do I need to feel like I'm proving my worth? That YOU, U-turn, is exceptionally helpful. And in relational sabotage, again, these are tricky things. And they're interesting. And they're the blossoms of life, right? This is the fun part of living. Identify the behavior, write down, define, what are your sabotaging behaviors? How are you doing it? What does it mean? And then you have to kind of create a plan. And you're going to also do that mindfulness work. Go back to your values. If you wrote them down, write the top 5 values and go, okay, what are these things that are kind of carabining off of each other? The thing that I remind people about is that feelings that are in your heart, they are not generic. So just because there's feelings, I'm having feelings on that. Boy, do I hear that saying a lot. I'm feeling a sort of way. And basically they're just trying to generic all of the feelings. The delightful thing about you and me and everyone we know is that we're complex. So just because there's this whole suite of emotions on the back shelf doesn't mean that the same thing is in all of them. So you have to identify that. We look at different types of avoidance. This one I see the least, which is you pull up as you go into the goal, right? I'm landing. I'm like, no, I'm not. These are people who pull out at the last end. I'm not going to work on this because it's the least amount. What I am going to talk about again are these competing interests that are running in your mind. But know that there is this other kind, and that might be yours. We're just not going to cover it today. And when you are looking at your solve, right, defining it, now I got to create an action plan. Now I got to play the game. And sometimes the things that are competing in your mind are not logical. That you have a different interest that's running in your mind, and that thing has nothing to be logical. The purpose that you're trying to get to is the freedom for you to be you, even if it's kind of wonky, even if it doesn't make sense. That we're looking at those self-sabotage things within you so that you can be, right, you at your well within. So when you hear this from me, you hear it from me 1,000 times, if not one, right? 1,000 times. You only have one goal in your business every day, and that is for you to be well within as a person, right? We only have one goal. It is to be well within. If you are sabotaging yourself, it doesn't feel well within. In business, we have a second part to that statement. It is also to be well within and to utilize the well, right? That internal well, that deep, full cavern of magic that is inside of you. So it is to be well within and to be able to utilize the well that is within us. And yes, you can quote me on that 1,000,000 times, that it is so important. So self-sabotage is one of those things where if you know your values, if you go back to chaos theory, we build one thing and then another thing can happen. This is where you're going to see the magic of the work that you've done in the past come forward and really be a blessing in your life, really give you mastery, choices, and leverage. So if you did your values, or if you haven't done them, go back and define them. Because these improvements, by adding up these little pieces of stuff, that's what chaos theory is about, that we can start adding choices and leverage and improvements on top of each other. And suddenly it moves really fast. My quick words of advice: small stakes wins. This is the smile that should be in your heart, is to look at, these are the things that I'm doing to sabotage. This is why I'm doing them. This is how they're butting up against each other. Now let me think of a way that how can I have a small stakes win on this subject? And that is really focusing in on healthy risk taking, small risk taking. So if you're uncomfortable with people or places, because that was a way that you had kept safe, now let's start saying yes. Let's start opting in. Many of the things, I had one the other day for myself where somebody handed me a pair of tickets to a play I didn't ask for. I didn't know anything about it. It felt different, but they're like, here, I think you should go to this. And instead of going, I went, let me lean in. This is a small thing. This is a healthy risk taking. So I went to it and it was wonderful. It was not something that I would have picked for myself, but it was fascinating. It was fabulous. It was perfect. So find some healthy risk taking. Sometimes that is opting in. Not only do I love this hair color on this slide, but the waterfall of abundance. It is exactly like this this hair color, spoken from someone who used to be a hairdresser, right? That you can't, it's mixing in these threads and these drops of fresh color, of possibility and prosperity into the flow of your everyday thing. We're really looking to kind of drop into the waterfall of your life, just these drops of fresh color, of fresh ideas. It doesn't start one and go into the next. It's really a mixing. So you're really looking for that waterfall of abundance, looking at the things you're sabotaging, identifying what they are, and writing them down, and now starting an action plan. How can I start changing this and getting them into the every flow? Because going back to the slide you saw before, many small choices will make success or failure. And it's really hard to know the size of your impact when it's spread out over all of these different things. So it's paying attention to them. It's looking at that pebble method. How many things are there? And for those of you who are kind of like sad that I missed the perfectionist stop, this is for you, and it's learning how to bunt, B-U-N-T. It's a term in baseball where you just hit the ball a tiny bit. Learn bunting. It's a small stakes win, but it's really looking at how can you stop trying to make a home run every time. Let's just peck at the ball, move it a little bit further, try to make a base run. And for a perfectionist, this is the most difficult task we could get. We actually will have a whole nother class on that. You also want to bring yourself to the point where you go, let me start cracking some of these eggshells open. These are when you start to go, why am I doing stuff? I want you to listen to the voice in your head. And I want you to kind of start cracking that eggshell open. And more times than you may like, it is going to come back to something around, I want to be liked. I want to be liked. And the anxiety of uncertainty is often coming back to, I want to be liked. And right, this is how we start communicating about your changes. We're going to start talking about the ways that you're going to change. And that change is really talking to people about, I'm doing a small stakes win. Will you walk this baby step with me? Will you do some of this other things? Use the pebble method. It is to say, you don't have to interrupt your day 10 or 12 times to start sorting out all of this emotional garbage, or perplexity, or illumination. What you can do is just take a pebble, put it in your pocket, and utilize that and focus it in. When you are understanding what your emotions are that are attached to values, now you can start to see the parallels, and it makes it really easy to make an identification plan. So sometimes we are turned off. We've turned off all of the things that tell us, hey, this is the wrong item, or this is how it's moving, or this is bumping against this. Many times we've turned those signals. So it's inviting the signals to come back and paying attention to them. Okay, so here is your task list. This is the kind of my last slide for today, right? Write a list of the top 10 areas of your introspection. For those of you who are live, this is a replay, this is a recap, so it's not there. Review your values work. Look at your daily targets and goals and really start to understand your targets versus goals. Mindful introspection is the key item I want you to take away, and really understanding the difference between trauma and sabotage. Sometimes they are magically connected and sometimes they are not. So that was a big recap. There's a longer class for you. You can always take that online. But here's the thing I want you to take away from today. In chaos theory, one thing happens and another thing can happen on top of that. Because this one thing was invented, now a new thing can happen. Because of the work you've done in your values work, now we can come back in to sabotage work or to trauma work or to journaling, right? We can start to add these concepts together, and then we really start to get a game plan that's much more fast, much more able to kind of be not so painful, because you have all of the building blocks to find your way through. And that is the part where I would give yourself a little esteem. I would give yourself some praise. I would consider how much you've already learned, because it actually, by doing the small bits of work that you're doing on your prosperity, you don't have to always feel like you have to conserve all your effort, because this is a big lift. The more little pieces that you grab, the more leverage you have, the easier it is to lift these big, heavy things. So congratulations on the work you've already done. Thank you for being with me today and doing the recap. I like recaps, but boy, do I feel like I'm talking really fast. So I'll see you again. I'll see you in class. And thanks for being here.